thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
Good morning. Hi. I'm well, thank you. How are you?
You are just a bundle of energy. I'm really looking forward to this. So, listen, before we get started, I'm good, by the way. So, I didn't answer. Thank you for asking. Not used to being asked. Tell me, tell me, how did you first get into rowing? What was the interest there?
Well, do you know, for me, I grew up in the Midlands, in a small town, Leek. It's very, very beautiful, quite small. And rowing wasn't part of my background at all. I went to my local comprehensive, enjoyed school. I was quite a geek. I love maths and science, and I just thought my future would be in that. I always really competitive. So I was in the school sports teams and so on, but I was sort of tall and gangly and I played netball, but I broke somebody's arm once from tripping them over with my big feet and legs, and so I just thought I didn't really see sport as my future at all. I went off to Cambridge to study natural sciences, and really thought that would be what I would end up doing, something academic. But when I got there, it was just such a wide new horizon. I remember going into the Freshers' Fair and feeling like a kid in a sweet shop, thinking, "Oh, I'm going to join the ice hockey and I'm going to join the windsurfing." And luckily for me, somebody saw me coming and kind of blocking out the light in the doorway, and said, "You're enormous. You need to be down at the river with your own kind." And I went, did some novice rowing just for fun with my college, Newnham College. So I was 18 by then, and loved it. Loved the sport. Loved the people. Loved the sort of sense of camaraderie, the feeling of learning and understanding something as a team and making those little improvements as a team. That's what got the bug for me. And the amazing contrast that you could get from working really, really hard, with lectures and so on, and then being out in the countryside, out on the river. So yeah, I just got the bug from there. But I never thought it was going to take over my life in the way that it did.
Do you know what? You're hilarious. For people who don't know you, because you're saying you're big and gangly, how tall are you?
I'm 6 foot exactly. So I've spent enough time with rowers now that I think I'm normal size, and then I go into a sort of non-rowing environment and think, oh.
So you are tall. You are tall then. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me, you learned. So you started rowing at 18, which is quite not being rude, quite old to start rowing
Yeah.
for somebody who then becomes an Olympian. How did you sort of learn really fast? Because you did learn fast.
Yeah, so I was strong right from the off. So when we did competitions on the rowing machine, I'm going to get these bits of hair behind my hair. I was strong on the rowing machine. So I sort of knew that I had some potential from that. And that really got my interest. I love data. There was some evidence there. So I was going to be able to sort of be powerful. But for me, the real big questions were, could I be technically good enough quickly? Because, many people have been rowing since school. And also, could I psychologically manage? Because rowing is a very painful sport. And I just thought I wouldn't be tough enough. I thought I would crack under the pressure. And I wasn't sure whether that was something that you could learn to do. So, being a geek, I set about really deliberately trying to understand those things and trying to make incremental progress. Now, on the technical side, I thought, okay, my maths and science is a strength. I can try and understand the physics of this boat and try and translate everything that the coach says to me into an understanding of how the boat moves and build up this picture. And that turned out to be a slow but thorough method. Some people who are more intuitive than me made quicker progress, but I think I got to a better place in the end. And then on the psychological stuff, there's nothing for it but to put yourself in difficult situations and get used to them and comfortable with them, and learn to think clearly under pressure like that. And then it was possible to learn, and that was a great revelation to me.
I love the fact that you apply your geekiness to the learning. I really like. I didn't realize that rowing was particularly painful. So I'm learning a lot here. How did you feel before your first Olympics, though? That must have been an incredible feeling to know that you're going to go into the Olympics. Tell us what that was like.
So my first Olympics was Beijing Olympics, so back in 2008. It was quite an alien environment out in China for me. I was in a double scull, and we'd had a rough year. I'd had glandular fever that year. So I spent a lot of the year thinking that I wasn't going to make the Olympics at all. And if I did, any result would be a good result. So we got there, and I remember feeling a huge, overwhelming sense of imposter syndrome. I remember walking into the Olympic Village and the Williams sisters were arriving at the same time, and just thinking, gosh, there's real sports stars here. How can I even deserve to be in this environment? I'm sure that's a feeling that loads of people will recognise. And I remember Team GB's medals started coming. Nicole Cook got a bronze medal in the cycling, and that was our first medal. And we had a sort of honours board in our team lounge, and her name went on the bronze medal. I was thinking, gosh, there's so much excitement about a bronze medal. Any medal will be good. I'll take any medal. But I had this fear, and I remember sitting on the start line thinking that I just need to play to my strengths, and this is a matter of physics. And if I can move the boat in the way that I know is the best way to move the boat, that will determine the speed of the boat, and that will determine the outcome of the race. So all I need to do is zone in on the physics and just execute that. And all of these unhelpful emotions need to just go, and I need to almost not feel. So that was what I was trying to do in Beijing.
Wow.
As we had a really close race, actually. We got into a fight that we didn't expect to be in. The Chinese crew were rated really highly, and we got in front of them at halfway, and we were in a bronze medal position. I remember thinking, oh, we're going to get a medal here. This is good. There were a couple of crews way out in front. And then as we got into the last minute of the race, Elise, my partner, started calling, we can do this. We can win, push for the goal, basically. And in the last 30 strokes, I found this gear, and I didn't know I had it. And it was all to do with adrenaline, belief, excitement. It released something, whether it's biochemical, I'm still a geek, I still want to understand this, but what did it do to my body that made me be able to push something that I hadn't pushed before? And we came charging through, and we didn't get through, but we got to within 6 inches of these two leading crews, and it's all a photo finish. We got the bronze medal. But that last 250 meters, I just, it wasn't in the evidence. It wasn't in the data for me. I thought there's something else here. There's a real human element. I've got to understand how to tap into that when I need it. And if we'd have believed on the start line that we were capable of the gold, what could that have made the difference? Yeah, of course it could. And then I got really excited about London and thinking, okay, so I've had an awesome roller coaster ride to get to an Olympic bronze medal. Now it's going to be really fascinating to try and get a gold.
Fantastic. You are competitive, aren't you? And you said actually earlier that you're competitive, and I love the fact that you keep referring to data. I'm going to come back to data if I may, but I want to talk to you about the competitive bit, because you had a partnership with Katherine Grainger that worked well. How does that work when you are competitive? Talk me through that. What made it work?
Yeah, I mean, Catherine's an amazing athlete, as everybody knows, and she's so different to me. She is an absolute instinctive red mist kind of athlete. She gets on the start line and she has a gear, and she just loves racing. She loves that competitive moment. She loves the sort of eyeball to eyeball, being in the thick of it, and it's so infectious. And rowing with her, we first got in the boat together 3 years before London, and I'd been in that boat for years by then. It's the double scull again, and Katherine had been in bigger boats and smaller boats, but not in the double scull. So I sort of had a good feel for the event, and I got in it with her, and we're built on the same frame, got same sort of body size and so on, and it moved. And I knew from that moment there was something special. So, Katherine, we can set this event on fire together if we go for it in this event. And she brought those elements to me that I just found so hard to tap into. She gave me, those. When we were racing together, I was always excited. I was always looking forward to it. I was always just thinking, come on, bring it to us. She just had that energy, and it was infectious. But for her, the sort of incremental day by day, how we're going to find, a millimetre today and a millimetre the next and a millimetre that, she's much more bored with that. So we were really greater than some of our parts, and we really appreciated what each other could bring to that partnership. It had a diversity, and I think what made it work is we so appreciated what the other one was able to give, and we also had a lot of trust. You know, we never let each other down in those 3 years. You know, not in any training session, not any day, never. Even sort of show a chink of a sort of weakness with what we were doing with the crew, and then we knew on that start line we could just rely on each other.
Wow, that's an
Yeah.
amazing relationship to have. That's fantastic. I love that. I'm going to let you geek out now because I know you're desperate to geek out because I know you love it. And actually, I think it's fascinating for, especially for business audiences, to hear how you use data. Talk to me about how you've used data to your advantage. You've given us some examples, but I know this is something you can go really deep into. Tell us a bit more.
So in rowing, you've got some sensors on the gates that the oars go into. You can have the whole boat rigged up, so you can get really detailed picture of all of the different forces in different places and how you're moving and going to these graphs. So I quickly found that I was the person who was going to tune into this. But something that I found could give me a really big edge was, you know, you've got people who would love the data and look at that, and we had analysts in the team who would really understand how those graphs related to how a boat should move. But then on the other hand, you've got people who are just very good physically and psychologically, and on a human level, they're really great at communicating. They're really great at, you know, sort of intuiting things. And I found that the real interest was in mapping between the two, joining, you know, and translating between data and human. And so it's all about it was all about asking the right questions, being able to dive into the data and find a real concrete answer, and then bring that answer back out into something very tangible, very real world, that we're actually going to go and practice on the water right then. You know, that's the joy, and that's what I found in consulting too. You know, so often there's a siloed world. You've got people thinking strategy and leadership and people, and on the other hand, you've got people diving into it can be, you know, KPIs or big data, and unless you're asking the right questions, unless you know what your source of value is and what you want, what's going to actually move, in our case, the speed of the boat, or, you know, in a business case, you know, find real value, then the data is worthless. And because those people don't tend to talk to each other enough, or you don't have people sitting in the middle, then I think that's where the missed opportunities were. And I felt that in the rowing world, that could be my secret sauce, that I could, you know, I could pull stuff out of the data that people couldn't, and then talk to Katherine and our coach about it and say, you know, actually, you know, this little dip on the graph here, you know, I think it means this feeling. And I think if we move this feeling, I think that the boat will go faster, and we'll see it change on the graph, and that'll be our, you know, we'll have 2 bits of evidence.
I like that. I think that's brilliant. I like that you're talking about the two different sides not necessarily coming together, and that you're sort of like the secret sauce in the middle. I like that. Do you also analyze your competition in the same way? Do you do that? Is that important to do?
Yeah, it's important to know the strengths of your competition and the sort of things that they might do, without at any point taking anything for granted or discounting the fact that they might throw some surprises. But we used to visualize loads. We used to run races in our heads and put scenarios together that the opposition might throw at us and how we would respond to them. So it was a balance. Have the information at your fingertips, but very much row your own race and think about how you're going to take the race to them, what you're going to do that they can't match. Never too much thinking, oh, you know, they've got this strength, so how can we come up to that? You're always thinking, no, what are we going to do to them that they're not going to be able to live with?
Yeah, no, I get that, and I get the fact that you should be focusing on what that's good. That's really good advice, actually. I like that. So let's come back to the human side, and I will come back to the sort of the business content as well a bit later. But I want to come back to the human side of dealing with pressure. So you talked about how you felt before the Beijing Games, but it must have been very different when you had to deal with the pressure of being at home games. How did you cope with that?
So London was a completely different scenario in terms of pressure. You know, in Beijing, I was an unknown. Going into London, Katherine and I had had a lot of press. I think the Guardian had put us as Britain's best hope for a gold medal in 2012, and Jessica Ennis at number 2. So we thought we better have some plans to deal with it. How we dealt with it. So there's a couple of things that I found super helpful that I think can be stolen and used in other areas. One was having an incredibly robust framework for communication, so that all of the things that you want to say could be said in a timely fashion. You know, my biggest fear was leaving something until after the finish line, because you're tiptoeing around each other too much. So we actually did it as a jigsaw. We put everything that we wanted to put in our performance, whether it was being the fastest to the first 100 meters, or whether it was having an answer for every scenario, or all these different sort of psychological and physical elements. We drew them out, and then we would have weekly reviews where we would say, how is this element doing? Is it in? Is it out? And it just meant that we could talk about difficult things, like, or for Katherine, she'd had some really grim experiences of getting, rowed down in the last few hundred meters of an Olympic final. How is she ready with that? How's she doing with dealing with that preparation? Is our coach, he's giving us the right amount of feedback. It's hard to tell your coach sometimes, just be quiet and leave us alone. But you need to have a framework so that you can say those things, and you can say those things when you're all stressed, when you're all a bit tetchy, and you've got to have a forum for it. You've got to give each other permission to do it. You've got to be in the habit of doing it so that you can do it under any amount of stress and pressure.
Yeah,
that was a big one. The other one was more about how to get your brain into a space where you could think really clearly, make really good decisions under pressure, and kind of absolutely trust yourself with all of those very, very overwhelming emotions sort of crashing over you, and slightly unpredictable emotions too. And what I learned over the course of my rowing is that terror and anxiety is really, really close to excitement in terms of your psychological state. And so I think of it as a sort of two axes. You've got terror over here, and you've got excitement over here, and here you've got kind of being super up for it and ready, and here you've got being asleep and dormant. And so you have to know whereabouts on those axes is your optimal level for performance. For some people it's higher up here than others, and for some people they need a little bit of fear, and fear is helpful. For me, fear was really inhibiting. Fear made me close down. Fear made me not take risks. Fear made me tense. Fear made me think less clearly. And so I had to be excited. And so if I could, the more excited I could be, the less afraid I was. And I've already spoken a bit about Katherine, how she brought that to us. But I would think, I can't wait until the 1 minute call where we're going to push into our rhythm, and no one's going to be able to live with us. And I'm just really looking forward to that moment. And I hope that the Australians look round and do a push at us, because when they do that, I'm going to do this. And just kind of force myself to look forward to bits, and force myself to find things to be excited about. And with that way, you could have a freedom and an enjoyment of something, which otherwise could feel very crushing.
Absolutely. And I'm with you there with regards to fear. If I'm scared, I absolutely, like you, I close down. But if I'm excited, I don't feel tired. I don't feel pressure. I just can do, I can't sleep though when I'm excited.
No.
Which actually must be a big problem for you if you're super excited about racing and you have to sleep. What did you do or are you a very good sleeper because you're exhausted at the end of the day?
I mean, normally a very good sleeper, and rowing training has that effect. But the night before the Olympic final, I don't think I slept much at all. But I woke up feeling fine. I think we just tapered so well. We were well rested into that. There was so much adrenaline and everything else going on. I don't think my body
you didn't give it a chance.
Already.
Yeah, you didn't give it a chance to be tired. So you wait.
No.
So tell me, what are your favourite memories of London 2012?
I think when I first started to get an inkling of the specialness of a home games, there were a couple of moments early on, when we first arrived at Eton Dorney, where we were racing, and it's a lake we were really familiar with, but the grandstands were up and the flags were up, and it, it felt like a stadium rather than a flat lake. And thinking, built us a playground. They've gone and built us a playground. How lucky are we? And then the volunteers started coming, and we would be training early in the morning, and any sort of British crew would just get whoops and cheers just from doing an early morning little paddle before racing. And the first day when spectators came into the venue, we were all in our kit. The British team had a hotel the other side of the river from Eton Dorney, so we would come in on a boat and walk in actually the same way as the spectators did. And been to loads of rowing events, just to get totally ignored. But we just the spectators made a guard of honour and stood to the side, and the British team, we walked through with our kit, and they just sort of clapped us in, and it's really emotional, and just realised that we were part of something much bigger than going backwards quickly in a boat, which had always seemed quite self-indulgent.
It is an odd way to earn a living, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is odd. So tell me, what do you remember about the race itself?
So the race, I remember sitting on the start line, and they call out the names of the 6 crews, and usually 2 kilometres away in a rowing race, so from the finish line, and the spectators were at the finish line. So normally this is all done in sort of deathly silence. But for London, when the announcer called, Great Britain, there was a sort of pause, time delay, and then you just heard this rumble coming up the lake. Thinking, wow, this is it. We're not going to be able to hear ourselves think when we get in front of those stands. I remember coming up a start, and a good start, feeling that we were up and at speed and in our plan, really concentrating on just the stroke we were on, trying not to think ahead, trying not to think what it all meant, just thinking about executing that stroke to the best of our ability. Remember getting out ahead just in front of the Australians, and I remember Katherine being a little bit, I thought, frantic. She'd got this gear, and me trying to judge whether it was too much, whether it was a little bit wheel spinny, whether we were efficient enough, and trying to sort of call the right calls to get us into something super efficient. So I was really in that first half of the race thinking, trying to do my job, which I absolutely love. In the bow seat, you get to analyse how the boat is moving, how Catherine's moving, how I'm moving, make the decisions, and look around at the race and analyse what everyone else is doing, make those calls. And I remember our big rivals, the Australians, having a look at us. They were slightly down, and me thinking, they're going to do a push. They're going to do 15 strokes, and then they're going to look around again to see what they have, what impact they've made. And so then I made a call to Katherine, and we did a push, just slightly in front. They can't see us, and they look around again, and we're slightly further away. So they put in some extra effort, and it's kind of, they're actually further down. And it's playing with people's minds like that. That's actually quite fun if you're sort of evilly competitive like I am. And at that point in the rowing race, that we're thinking, okay, this is we should win this, and they're thinking we might not win this. But you then have this battle in your head to not get ahead and not start thinking, don't mess up, but think, do this stroke how I want it, do this stroke how I want it, just staying, in the moment, in the zone. But I will admit, the last 10 or 15 strokes, there was some sunlight coming across the water, just glittering. The crowd in the metal grandstands were sort of stamping their feet, and that rumble was coming across. You could pretty much feel it in the handles, and me thinking, I just want to bottle this. If I could just videotape this moment and this feeling, these last 10 strokes, and replay it for the rest of my life, that's all I need.
I love that. I love that you're evilly competitive. I like that. So we're not going to forget that. You said it. So a couple of other things I really want to cover before I let you go. I really want to talk about, because obviously listening to you, there's so much that's valuable to a business audience in terms of data, performance, getting feedback, communication, so much there. When you are invited to speak to corporates and business audiences, what's the main messaging that you try to leave them with? What are they asking for?
Okay, so a lot of the time I do speak on use of data, and I will then share sort of more depth about the specifics of how a performance is built together. So, everybody's heard of Dave Brailsford and his marginal gains, and I think it's really fascinating, in a business context or in a sports context. How do you break that performance down into those marginal gains? It's all very well knowing that you're looking for them, but how do you understand what those levers are that are actually going to move the performance? For us, we have this goal setting structure where our objective was to win the Olympics, but then breaking that down again to saying, okay, so what does a team that win the Olympics actually look like? Well, they should be a team that can break the Olympic record. They should be a team that can chase other people out of the event that don't even want to race them. It should be at that level. Okay, what does the team at that level look like? Well, they need to have these performance characteristics about the shape of their race. And what do those performance characteristics require in terms of, our weights program, our nutrition program, our psychology program, the orthotics in our shoes, how many grams of protein, all of those kind of things. And getting a deep understanding that if we do this, that's going to move that, but we can't do absolutely everything because 365 days in a year. So what's going to move things the most? And and I think for a business organization, when I've worked with organizations, when I talk about this, the analogies are perfect. You look at your actions and your KPIs, and are they actually moving the source of value? And do you understand how they relate to each other? And this is where I think that joining together data sets for an organization can be really, really exciting and illuminating, because it allows you to ask the questions, but so long as you know what the source of value is that you're trying to move in the first place.
I like that. I think that's really powerful. And of course, then you have all your wonderful stories to tell around it, and the great stories and the great images, and it's fabulous. Something that people may not know about you, and I was fascinated to find out about this. You keep bees and you restore camper vans. I mean, when do you have time to do that?
Well, I'm lucky enough, we live out in the Cotswolds, and I love practical things, and I really, really love where you get to do something practical and use your brain at the same time. So we bought a Sprinter van. Lots of people love a Sprinter van conversion, and I drew the interior on CAD, and then had it cut with a CNC machine. It's lovely. We've got bunks for our kids and climbing wall holes and so on. I'm always tinkering with it, and I put a new battery in it this week, so going up to Scotland for our summer holidays. And the bees is really interesting as well, because it's a whole new world to understand, and with a little frisson of danger because you might get stung, and you get honey.
I'm a big fan of honey. Big fan of honey. So yeah,
I just love learning new stuff. So I'm always going to be getting into projects. I've got a bucket list as long as.
Yeah, you're just a full-time geek, aren't you, really? That's a full-time geek with an evil competitive streak who calls herself Ganglia. I mean, you're fabulous, absolutely fabulous. So finally, what is next for you, Anna?
So for me, I spend a big part of my time with businesses doing either one-off speaking engagements, workshops, writing training programs, but I also undertake broader consulting programs too, just to if people want a longer term program. And also as a former McKinsey consultant, I can offer something a little broader than just an athlete perspective. So sometimes I'm hired as an athlete, and sometimes I'm hired as a strategy consultant, and I like to mix it up because I like life to be interesting. And then the other part of my time, I do some rowing coaching with young girls just getting into the sport, because I just love to be in touch, love to be outside, and love to feel that I'm giving something back to the sport. And I think in the longer term, I'd like to bring those two things back together and do some sort of more sports leadership type stuff. But family at the moment, so it's a bit of a mishmash, project based, but lots of variety.
It sounds like a lot of variety. Sounds really well balanced to me, and we will be watching this space to see what happens next when you bring it all together. Thank you so much, Anna, for being a fabulous guest. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
I really did. Thank you for talking to me.
Pleasure. So now I just need to thank the listeners for listening to The Speaker Show. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on iTunes. You can keep up with future episodes at Speakers Associates website. I'll put my teeth back in. And that's speakersassociates.com, or on iTunes, Google Podcast, or your favorite podcast app. See you next week. Bye-bye and thank you.